Welcome to the Accelerating Operational Performance podcast. I'm Greg Schinkel, President of Unique Training and Development and Frontline Leadership Systems. And in today's episode, I wanted to feature two relatively new things that we're offering. One is called the Plant Manager Excellence Program, and that is available either on-site for your plant managers if you have a group of them that you would like to put through the program, or it's also available as a public workshop. And the second thing to mention is that we now have a demonstrated leadership behaviors assessment that we can measure the behavior change as we're going through our various training programs. And of course, if you want any more information, please reach out to us at uniquedevelopment.com. So today I'm really excited to welcome our guest. I only met this guest 2 months ago in Washington, D.C. at an industry event, and I was so blown away by our first impressions that I went out and I bought his book while I was flying back from Washington, D.C. I read it, and then after buying the ebook, I then bought a hard copy for our general manager, and we've been using it as a self-study discussion tool. And Steve, who I'll introduce in just a moment, I'm sure his book sales had to have a little minor spike as I told everybody I knew about the book. So that's a good thing. So let me introduce Steve, and I'm going to read his intro just to do it justice. My guest today is Steve Cohen, who has been a founder, an operator, a consultant, and an investor in the talent development industry. That's our fancy word for the training business, for more than 45 years. Steve is the founder and principal of the Strategic Leadership Collaborative. He's earned worldwide recognition, including being named a thought leader by the ATD, which is the Association for Talent Development. But really stands out to me is his track record of doing. He has founded or led 8 different enterprises in the education and training space, consistently driving top and bottom line performance, which we're going to dive into today. He has sat on 24 different advisory boards, guiding firms through mergers, acquisitions, and strategic growth. He's also shared his wisdom in over 100 published articles, which I read many of those as I was dining in the restaurant in the airport on my way back from that meeting, and 2 books, his latest being 12 Winning Strategies for Building a Talent Development Firm. And that's the one I've been telling everybody in our industry about, a lot of colleagues. It's really a culmination of his life's work, including the mistakes made and the lessons learned along the way. He holds a doctorate from the University of Tennessee and brings a wealth of practical street smart business sense to the table. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. Steve, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Greg. Very happy.
And just to let everybody know, if you do need to get in touch with Steve, his website is strategicleadershipcollaborative.com. That's strategicleadershipcollaborative.com. And if you are a training practitioner, talent development practitioner, I strongly recommend you buy his book. So, Steve, let's start off with, I just talked a little bit about your highlights of your journey, but what kind of stands out for you as some of the most meaningful pivot points or things that really stand out for you in your journey to where you're at right now?
Well, thanks, Greg. It's a long journey. That stands out. It's really, I was just calculating that before I got on. I was saying, I think it's over 50 years.
Wow. Wow.
And that is a wow. And what's, I think, most interesting as I talk to other colleagues like yourself is that that's what I've been doing from the very beginning. This is the industry. I went to graduate school. I then became a professor at the University of South Florida and in IO, Industrial Organizational Psychology. And then I started consulting. And
Wow.
I never veered off of that. Although my mother kept wondering why I had so many different jobs, the 8 different positions, etc. She kept saying, "Can't you hold a job?" Turned out that I was somewhat unique and very fortunate and blessed that I was able to sell 5 or 6 of my companies that I had over the years. And that was not the intent. Never planned to do anything of the sorts. Didn't even know that you could sell a company, by the way.
Yeah.
So a lot of those job changes are being bought by someone else or divesting, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then some years later, people started to say, well, geez, you've been in so many companies. Maybe you could help our company. This is the talent development, consulting businesses. And so I pivoted, quite frankly, and for the last 15 years have pretty much been only been on boards or been doing strategic planning for firms in our industry, for consulting firms, and that's kind of unique. I've been very lucky. I met, again, through coincidence, a private equity firm called the Riverside Company, who had a vertical, or has a vertical, in the training and development or learning business. And they kept asking me to be on the board of some of their companies. So it was a great experience, and I've really enjoyed that over the years. So
Yeah.
that's a little history.
Yeah, that caught my attention, and maybe to give, I realize for our audience that this isn't maybe our usual type of guest. Steve is unusual and unique in a good way. But the reason why I wanted to invite Steve is that at this meeting, so Steve and I are both members. I'm a newer member. Steve's a longtime member of ISA, which is the Association of Learning Providers. What I love about it is it's around 60-ish members who run talent development firms. And I joined, and at the meeting that we met at, Steve was facilitating a group of other C-level owners of training or talent development businesses. And I had shared that we had this major new project in which the client really wanted to measure outcomes. So Steve and I got into a good dialogue about, what are the nuances of measuring impact from training? What's realistic? Because Steve has his doctorate, he really also schooled me in be very cautious about what you're measuring and whether you're really measuring the thing you think you are. And that really helped us win that project, which is probably our largest ever. And I was sharing with Steve just before we went on the air that in that project, we're using this new tool called the Demonstrated Behaviors Leadership Behavior Assessment. And I said, I'm still not sure what we're going to see when we measure that, but I'm confident that our training is good, and so we're going to see the outcomes. So, Steve, let's go into, because, and by the way, so if you're an audience member and you're like a plant manager, production manager, chief operating officer, what I want you to pay attention to as Steve and I go through our dialogue here is, to the extent you're deploying leadership development programs or other training and development programs, I just want you to hear how you can maybe get the most out of some of those initiatives, because there's lots of feel-good, check the box, I read a book and deployed it sort of programs that people embrace, and there's just ways of getting even more from what you're doing. So, Steve, what do you think, one of our questions that I gave to you is, because you've been in so many different firms, when have you seen companies get the most out of their leadership development processes versus maybe other situations where they didn't get as much out of it?
That's a great question. I think the most important thing, sounds kind of funny, is top executive support. If you're in a training department or development or human resource, et cetera, and there's an initiative to train X people in X topic, if you don't have the support of your top executives for that, and that comes in a lot of ways, we can talk about what those ways are, it's probably going to die shortly, et cetera. Yeah. And the reason it's going to die is you won't have this, it won't be strategically aligned with where the business is going. So I think the most important factor is that whatever the initiative is, it's strategically aligned with the strategy of the business, not just your department. And I think that all too often it is a checkbox. And the executives say, yeah, we want leadership development, go have a leadership, put all our people through, without any guidance as to what end. Yeah. So I think it's very important. So I would say that boils down to the clarity on what you want to achieve and how to get there. Yeah. I mean, that's key. And that what you want to achieve and how to get there has got to be voiced by your top executives in the business. So that's number one. Maybe that sounds pedantic and like, oh, well, of course, but it's not easy to get. etc.
No, I want to actually unpack that a little bit more. The other thing I'm going to, of course, have you continue on that just for a minute. But I've noticed that in our case, with this new project, which again should be our largest as it rolls out, is that it started not so much with an inquiry from human resources or talent development. It actually started with an executive who was looking at, what would it take to move the needles on the performance in their business? And then he, watched a bunch of videos, and then he reached out, but he was really skeptical, which was great at first, because he's like, I don't want to just do a program for the sake of doing a program. I want something that'll actually have an impact. And the fact that he stayed with it at an operating level, and I will say that, and this is no disrespect to people in learning and development or human resources, I think if you realize that if you can get an executive to stay involved in the process right from the beginning, it will help the program have a bigger impact. Because I've witnessed just in the last 6 months, 2 of our clients had reorgs where they let go a lot of people in talent development, probably because they couldn't really figure out what the extra value added was. And so it's really in the L&D department's best interest to really make this something that operations, in our case, operations leadership, owns. And so I think, that sponsorship. But, besides just making an announcement and maybe kicking off a session with 5 minutes, is there other things that you see that executives can demonstrate their commitment towards, and maybe other things that you've seen make the project more, more robust and more impactful?
Yeah, absolutely. It shouldn't be perceived as an event.
Mm-hmm.
It's perceived as a process. It's not a one-time dip your people into the training pool and then forget about them. So having built-in follow-up, and learning is a process. Yeah. So if learning is a process that evolves over time, and all of us individually, from grade school to beyond, would say, yeah, we learn things over time, and they build upon one another, then the leadership development program should also be constructed as a process. So not one time, have follow-up, have coaches, and maybe some executives could be coaches. Have them be part of the process, however that makes sense for them. Yeah. Obviously, they have jobs, and everyone else has jobs, but part of their job should be
developing people.
Exactly. I mean, that's what leaders do. Yeah. So that I definitely believe that's important. I also think it's important not to bite off too much or more than you can chew, as the saying goes.
Yeah.
You can't solve all problems all the time with one, event, et cetera. So be clear on what you want to achieve, as I said earlier, and I would say add. This is back to your earlier intro. Add milestones, measuring points that you can say we are achieving this or we're not.
Yeah.
And don't do that after the fact. Do that as part of the program, like you said you're doing with your client.
Yeah.
Here's what we want to achieve, and this is how we're going to measure whether we can achieve. That would be ideal. And most organizations will buy into that because they want to know, am I getting results? And so bake into the process a results-driven agenda.
Yeah.
That's, to me,
Well,
very important.
I agree. It's funny, Steve, that you said, sometimes people want to do everything. My dad, who passed a few years ago, but I took this business over from my father, and he had worked at General Motors, as did I. And so we've always been sort of interested in frontline leadership and manufacturing. But what he said is, what would really sell well is a lunch and learn on everything you need to know to be a leader. And he said people would buy that because they think, boy, if I can get everything in one program, it would be amazing. And another related story, and this was a client in the automotive parts manufacturing business, and we started working with them when they only had maybe 200 or 300 people, and then they grew to several thousand employees. But when I came back to the president after a good initiative that we had run, and I said, "Oh, I got some new ideas for the next program," he goes, "Greg, we don't need more ideas. We need you to go back and find new ways of teaching the same fundamentals over and over again, because even if a program is super interesting and it's highly rated and it even gets people to change a little bit, there is so much that they didn't use from that first run through that if you find a way of kind of going back to the fundamentals, over and over again in refreshing ways instead of trying to add more stuff to their plates. So I think, you're right about that, and even Kirk Langford, our general manager, said our program really isn't the 6 half days that our typical frontline leadership is, or our new plant manager program is 6 full days of content spread out over time. It's really not that. It's that plus the 9 months of follow-up and the measuring and the activation. And honestly, even before the training happens, how the table is set for people to even go into it. Steve, I have to relate one other quick thing, because when we first started doing pre-training surveys, it was funny, the motivation behind it. A lot of people were told literally the day before the training that you're in a class that's tomorrow, right? And so we were like disturbed that that would be the case, because when your boss tells you you're going to training tomorrow, you're kind of agitated. Like, couldn't you have given me like a week or two heads up? So we actually started to do the surveys, not even so much to gather great information as just to give people a chance to know that you're going to training in a couple of weeks. And then we said to our most recent clients, if you would just do this one thing, like have a sit down with each learner, like the manager and the learner, with the results of the assessment that we've done, or even just talking about the training curriculum, and just say, hey, when you're going to this is what I'm hoping that we're going to pick out of it. Just anything that I will still say it's amazing that the training does as well as it does, even when it doesn't have those components, but there's just so many ways to get more out of it anyway.
Very
You wrote this book, which again, I was so enthusiastic. Not only did I buy a copy, I bought 2 copies. And then I also have been telling everybody I know. So if you saw a little spike in either ebook sales or physical book sales, this is an amazing guide. I should have brought a copy, and it's in Kirk's office nearby here. So the book is called 12 Winning Strategies for Building a Talent Development Firm. An action. Oh, you got it. Good. Excellent. So, by the way, if anyone, this isn't maybe going to be something an executive would be interested in, unless you think you're going to be like my dad or I and get out of the business and start doing training. But this is really great for anyone who's started a firm, is running a firm. In my case, I've been running it for 3 decades, and I still found it really interesting. But this was really, I saw it as a culmination after you were writing all those great articles for ATD, which again, people can search them out on the atd.org website. But I'm wondering, Steve, if you could just say, what was it that made you decide that you needed to compile this?
Great question. I was thinking back about that and the evolution of it. So I was very active with the ATD. Again, for those of you not in the industry, that's our Association of Talent Development, and it is usually in-house people, but also consultants in the field. And there are, 50,000 members. I mean, it's huge. So it's international, et cetera. And so I was very active, knew a lot of people there. And since I was in the consulting part of the industry, they asked me if I would write a book about it. And so I did. I wrote a book for them, and they published it, et cetera, Building a Talent Development Firm or something like that, et cetera. And it got, good response. I mean, it's not a top seller, et cetera, but it got good response. And then they said, would you give us little bites of information about this and start a blog?
Yeah.
So I did, and for 5-6 years, I wrote a blog. I came up with 80 or 90 1.5-page kind of blogs, and it was starting to shape up that there were categories that I inadvertently kind of found through that, and I decided to take all those blogs and put them together in this new book on strategies. And so that's what was so amazing, is that there had never been anything in our industry written about how you build a business in the industry.
Right.
There's been books on how you build a consulting firm, but not specific to our industry. So that was kind of what happened, and I was getting good feedback from that. So that's how it all started.
Yeah,
And,
no, that's a great story. And again, while I was having dinner after the meeting that we were at in Washington, D.C., I was reading the blog post. I went all the way back. I went to the earliest one and I read them sort of in chronological order as you were writing them. And then I said, well, this stuff is gold. I got to buy the book. So I, got the Kindle version initially to save some money, but also just to, get my appetite whet. And then I'm reading the Kindle version, and then I ordered Kirk a hard copy. I said, so, we'll have one. And then I started to evangelize about it. But like you said, I've been in the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers, and I know in the US that's called the National Speakers Association. And they also do some great programming on, how to deliver a more effective keynote, of course, some on marketing. But no one really talks about, if you want to go beyond just yourself, and there's nothing wrong with being a sole practitioner in our industry, but if you want to actually build a business, and that's what my dad had really instilled it from the early days, is we want to build a business. We don't want it to just be a practice. And then as I read the book, and this is sort of a tangent question, you actually said that as a talent development firm, you've got to decide whether you're in the content business. Actually, before that, you even say, are you a business or are you basically a practice? And again, no shame to being a practice if that's what you want. And you're very clear in the book, like, design the business to do what you want it to do. And if you really want to be hands-on in delivering and you don't really want to build an enterprise, no worries. Like, make that choice. But if you're going to, think about whether you're a consulting firm, whether you're in the content business, that is, you have something proprietary, or you're really in the delivery business. And I have to say, that's when you won me over, because I realized that even though I'd like to think that some of our content is kind of cool, you mentioned very clearly in the book that these ideas around leadership have mostly been out there and people just find unique ways of teaching them. So I figured, actually, we are in the delivery business. We are not really in the content business, even though we write some great programs. So maybe you could just articulate this will be a little inside baseball, so somebody who's running a talent development firm, can you just lay out that argument between whether you're in content or consulting or delivery, and what that even means for your business?
Sure. There was a time early in the industry, and by the way, I'm not sure this is different from any other vertical businesses or industries. Yeah. There was a time when content was king. Yeah. I even wrote an article, I look back many years ago, about content's king, and if you don't have content, you have nothing.
Yeah.
And that's how our industry started. It was all based around the content of sales or sales processes or leadership. And then you go back and look at all the firms, and they started by saying, we're in the leadership business. And it was all content. Yeah. And over the years, what we found, particularly in the last couple of years, is that content's no longer king.
Yeah.
You can find it, get it, etc. And in fact, unbelievably, but people know this, if I wanted to develop a leadership development program tomorrow, I could go to ChatGPT and say, put together a one-day leadership development program that focused on this, and this, and it would print out a leadership development program.
Yeah.
So
thanks for telling our clients that, Steve. Now they're just going to use ChatGPT, which is way cheaper than hiring us. Yeah. But what you're getting to is that's not enough.
Well, hey, and that's exactly the point, because what has become more important is delivery. So you can have the content and have that 1.5 day thing, but if you don't know how to deliver it and you don't understand the underpinnings of learning and the things we've been talking about, it's going to fall flat on its face. And so the expertise that we have as an industry is now in delivery. How do we take everything from AI backwards and enhance the learning experience? How do we use technology to advance the skill sets of people? So I think the industry has evolved and significantly, and the differentiator today, unless you have something very specific content that nobody else has or nobody else is allowed to have, which is quite rare, quite frankly, even possible, then it's obvious we've turned the industry upside down, and now delivery is really the most important piece. How well do you get your content to the end learner?
Yeah.
And ensure that they, in fact, change their behaviors in a positive way.
You got it. And it's such a simple concept, but reading your book said, of course, we're in the delivery business. And it's funny because I can remember we were just kicking off at the time, which was probably our third really big project. And I say a big project because we were training several hundred people in the organization. And this was like one of the first engagements. And one of the executives said, and we were running like 3 classes simultaneously. It was a really big rollout, 3 instructors in a big venue, different groups. And this person who I think was like the controller, the financial controller of this manufacturing company, big consumer products company, he said, what you guys are teaching is so basic and fundamental, but I've never seen these guys eat it up like they are here. And he says, you've just got this way of teaching it that allows them to let their guard down, because most of the time these guys would be sitting there like this, barely tolerating the training. And he says they're enthusiastically participating. And so now in your book, by the way, you go further, and it's funny because we're looking at that ourselves, is how do you make sure that you have, and you called it magical sort of ways of teaching stuff. And in the delivery, so I want to go a little bit down there because we're really looking at how do we keep including elements like this. But you talk about it can't be just dry sort of content presentation. It has to have a magical element. And maybe, can you just articulate that a little bit?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, first of all, we have to accept the premise that people learn differently, that there is not necessarily one design that fits all learners.
Yeah.
As a result, in the programming, you ought to construct it, design and develop it so that people can access it the way they want to learn.
Right.
That might, you have some audio for some. Some people read it better. Some people listen better. Some people like videos.
Yeah.
So have a variety of learning tools and methodologies would be, I think, very, very key and important to that.
Yeah.
Same with timing. Allows people to devote what time they feel they need, etc., to a particular topic, or depending where they are. If they have great communication skills, then why do they have to spend as much time as someone on communication skills who doesn't have great communications? Yeah. So I think that to me is one of the keys. Mm-hmm. Look, in the classroom, or whether it's or technology, I think you need varied forms of vehicles of delivery. So we just again, some people will gravitate towards one versus the other, and it will be more effective for them and for the other. So I think variety is the spice of life.
Yeah.
And then let's face it, and some people in the industry don't want to accept this. This is a performance.
Yeah.
And so when you watch entertainment on whether it's a movie or on Netflix or anything, you want to be entertained.
Yeah.
In this regard, you want to be able to engage, not necessarily entertain your audience. And by engaging, that means making it a little interesting.
Yeah. You got to put a little twist in there. It's kind of like in a TV show. And sorry to interrupt, but I was thinking that the element of surprise. Somebody, I forget what. I took a number of workshops, of course, over the years, and one of them said it's not like the learners check out every once in a while. It's that they're mostly checked out and they check in every once in a while. And so you have to do something that makes their brain go, oh, this is interesting. This is novel. Because otherwise they get lulled and their brain wanders. And I mean, it might still be around the content, but they're not paying attention. So you actually have to have things that grab their attention in a sort of intriguing way. And you called it like adding the magic to the learning process. So I really love that.
And also in small spurts.
Yeah.
We learn in small spurts. So look, putting a 5-day leadership development program together, I've done many of them. Yeah. That's not a spurt. That's track meet. That's a marathon. So in small spurts and allowing them to access that on their own when they can, that's that learning process I was talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, we're talking to Steve Cohen, who is the author of a great book called 12 Winning Strategies for Building a Talent Development Firm, an Action Planning Guide. If you are a practitioner, I know that's not our main audience, but if you're a practitioner, I strongly endorse you buying that book. It's really enlightening if you want to build a talent development firm. His website is strategicleadershipcollaborative.com. So I know we've deviated a little bit from what I thought we would talk about. Could we talk for a minute about measurement? And one comment I'd make, and I think I may have got this at an ATD conference that I attended, and as Steve mentioned, the Association for Talent Development runs very large conventions. I remember it blew my mind once, and it was in Dallas maybe almost 30 years ago. I went to my first one, and just thousands and thousands of practitioners attending. And as Steve said, a lot of them are internal learning and development folks. But in measurement, and I remember at the time, by the way, somebody said we spent more time measuring than we did delivering the program. So that there is this like, how much time do you spend measuring? Could you just talk a little bit about measuring either impact or results and what your thoughts are on it?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Well, I would say if we do one thing very poorly in our industry, it's measuring the impact and results of our interventions. And the question is, well, why? Why wouldn't you want to do that? Seems so natural. Well, to be quite honest, to get real results is somewhat complicated. It's experimental design. And that not a lot of practitioners were trained in that, know that, or even understand it. So it's not without cause that they don't measure, but it doesn't happen. The second reason it doesn't happen, shame on us, all of us, is that people say, "Oh, wait, what if it doesn't work? What if I measure it and it doesn't work? Well, that's my job." So people put their heads in the sand and say, "Oh, it'll work." Well, that's not productive for the company or for the individuals, quite frankly. So in order to measure effectively, and this is going to sound like hearsay to a lot of people, you have to have what's called a control group. Guess what? Those are people who don't get trained.
Yeah, and you still want to measure because, and this is what, like, again, slapped me upside the head when I was at the meeting in Washington where I met you, is you said, without a control group, you really don't know whether the training was the intervention or even like, and so just to let people know, like we've been trying to measure things in our training for quite some time, and we do a fairly good job of it. Actually, let me back up for a minute. In the training business, there's what we call the happy sheet, which is really just like the reaction that people have to the training. And as long as the instructor is engaging and interesting, and the materials seem well organized, and the people are fed, and the temperature of the room's good, you usually can get good results from that. And for a lot of people, and I don't want to dismiss it because it is important that the reaction people have is the gateway to learning, because if that experience was poor, they're going to be disengaged from the learning. Beyond that, then you're starting to get into the impact. So when Steve said have a control group, I was thinking, imagine that you were in a site not getting the training, but you were still getting surveys to ask about your leaders' attention to certain things. And I think he made a good point. It's sort of like the old Hawthorne study from way back where they painted the walls and they changed the lighting up and down. You could argue just by surveying people that would actually start to change behavior without the training. Now, with this particular project that we're working on, the client didn't really embrace a control group, which again, most clients don't. But it'd be interesting that you might, just by surveying people, be able to change their behavior without the training intervention. Or maybe just an executive saying, hey, we need to pay more attention to this, that might do it. So, sorry, I interrupted you there, but is there more around the control group and why that's important?
Yeah, that you've highlighted a really good example of that. Think about the typical way that programs are evaluated is we give people a pre-assessment of something, of their behavior, let's say, and let's take leadership. And then after the program, we give them a post-test. And if there's a difference, we say, well, they improved, and it had to be the result of the training. But to your very point, it could be the result of someone caring that they get trained. It could be the result of them identifying issues in their pre-assessment. You don't know that it was the training. Right. Also think about all the things that can take place between your first assessment and your post-assessment. Illnesses in the family. Someone read a book. Someone saw a program. There's too much going on in the environment that needs to be controlled for, so that you can definitively say, you know what, when we look at everything and we equalize it, it was the training. That was the only difference. So control groups are, in theory, groups that don't receive the training. And see, well, if those received the training and those didn't receive the training, if those who received training are doing better, we may have some idea that training had the most impact. But having said that, there are lots of different types of control groups. So, Greg, you just mentioned one. One is you don't give them the pre-assessment. Because that can sensitize them, pre-sensitize them to the very things you said. There is, I'm not recommending this, but I will just to tell you how complicated. There is an experimental design in the field called a Solomon 4-group design. And there are 4 different groups. One, of course, the training group, one that doesn't get the training, one that gets the training later, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, if you're worried about, well, everybody has to go through the training, that group that didn't get the training can get it later, but they won't, that will be, it's called the serial training. They will get the training after the fact, and so that they're not compared with the group who went through the training. It's very complicated. I'm not recommending it for everybody. If you're lucky enough that your client wants to do that, then there are ways to do it. But at a very least, have a control group that minimizes the impact, et cetera. So, I mean, it's kind of fun to think.
It's fun because you did your doctorate. I think that's why it's a bit of fun for you. But
let me just do one thing.
Go ahead.
Because smile sheets are absolutely critical. I want to make sure to believe with that, what you just said. If they don't like it, they're not going to learn.
Right.
So that you want to find exactly how you said, what worked, were they engaged, did they find it interesting, would they come again, would they recommend it to someone else? Very important, in addition to the experiments.
No, that's good. Steve, we've covered a lot of ground, and I know we didn't get to everything, but I like to leave a little bit of food on the table. Plus, I want people to buy your book. But I wondered, is there anything that you wanted to share before we wrap up with our audience?
I just think perhaps one might be interested in what are some mistakes that you're likely to make. I think we've covered them in and out, but let me just end with mistakes, which doesn't sound like the best place to end. But I think, and we've said some of these, I think you've got to be clear on who you are, what your offer is, etc., and not try to become all things to all people at once. You got to narrow it down, narrow your focus on what behaviors you want to change, and make sure that you have methodologies in place to assess that, to have milestones, to have measurements, etc. Because I think otherwise you might be throwing bad money after bad money, and it just doesn't make sense to do that. And also, don't put your head in the sand. Adopt changing trends, adopt new technologies that fit your needs. And I think that's really important. The mistakes people make is they say, oh, well, I know that AI stuff is out there, but it doesn't bother me. Well, guess what? It might help you quite a bit if you adopt some portion of it.
You got it, Steve.
Yeah.
Thank you. By the way, I just want to say thank you so much. Again, you're an unconventional guest on the podcast because mostly we're focused on more operational improvement ideas. But I think our audience, if you made it this far through the episode, you realize that developing your team is crucial to retaining and increasing your competitiveness. And so I hope that what people can take away from this on the buying of training side, they can see that there's got to be a difference between a celebrity, and Steve articulates this in his book quite well. There's the celebrity who has a great concept and an idea, and for a while everybody wants to buy it, or the executive buys the book and then brings in the training. And then there's the kind of lasting view of developing. It doesn't have to be with a sole vendor, but it's like, what are you trying to achieve in the organization? Who's going to be your best partner over time? How can you continue to build the business case behind why that was a good investment and to continue to do so? That certainly is something that everyone in learning and development, human resources, and even operational leadership just needs to pay attention to. What are you trying to change in the behaviors? Why are those behavior changes important to your strategy and to what you're trying to achieve as a business? And which vendor is at least making an attempt? and I say this because this one project, Steve, that you helped coach me on, they've agreed that we can publish the data that we gather. Now, we still don't know how the data is going to turn out, but they're okay with us anonymizing the data and then showing people kind of what the impact can be. So I just wanted to say thank you for that. Again, Steve, thanks for giving us your time on the podcast today.
Appreciate it. I thank you for asking me. It was fun.
And if you want to reach Steve Cohen, his website is strategicleadershipcollaborative.com. Again, the book is 12 Winning Strategies for Building a Talent Development Firm, an Action Planning Guide. And it's available, of course, on Amazon, on Kindle. Whether you like ebooks or regular books, I think if you're in the business or think about being in the business, you want to get that book. All right, so that brings us to the end of another episode of the Accelerating Operational Performance podcast. A lot of people give us positive feedback about our podcast, but people discovering podcasts is really difficult. So if you can like and subscribe, send this as a message. Most of the podcasting apps allow you to send the podcast to someone else. Just share the good news, because that's how we grow in our impact. And I want to wish you well on your leadership journey. If there's anything that you need from us, get in touch. It starts with a conversation on our website at uniquedevelopment.com.